Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where Dr. Ross, Christian, and Brian host national experts who share ideas to manage money in the home as teammates. Today's topic is money and marriage for LGBTQ plus couples. Today's guests are David and John Alton Schneider. With their writing and speaking for DebtFreeGuys.com and Queer Money Podcast, they help queer people and allies live fabulously, not fabulously broke. As certified LGBTBEs, they are the queer voice in both personal and business finances. Their work has appeared on Forbes, Yahoo Finance, NBC, Squawk Box, and The News with Shepard Smith, ABC News, Rachel Ray Show, and Good Morning America, just to name a few. We are honored to have David and John join us. Enjoy the show. Well, we have David and John with us today, and we are thrilled that you two can join us.
Well, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you heard from the intro their great story, their professional expertise, and we want to dive straight into it. And if you missed a portion of the intro, their work has been featured on Forbes, Yahoo Finance, NBC, Squawk Box, The News with Shepard Smith, ABC News, Good Morning America. So y'all are clearly experts.
Keep going.
Yeah, this week we knocked out The Street, NerdWallet, and
Go Banking Rates.
Go Banking Rates, right?
Wow.
We're making the rounds right now.
And now Modern Husbands.
And now Modern Husbands. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And it's all well deserved, well earned. But y'all haven't always been the experts, right? So we want to get to your story on how you became experts together. But if you don't mind, we would love to start with any past financial decisions that you've made are hilariously regrettable.
We've got a lot of those, so we had to narrow it down. So why don't you go with yours and I'll go with mine.
Okay. So this was back in our during the time period where John and I were probably, I think maybe the first year or two of us being together. So we were still kind of really adapting to each other's likes and decisions in life. And we had been out hanging out with some friends, probably had a couple of drinks, and it was a Thursday evening, right? So the next day was a school night, or it was a school night. So the next day was a school day for work, and someone in the group said, "Let's go out." I mean, we were already out, but somebody said, "Let's go dancing. Let's go out to one of the clubs." I looked at my watch. John looked at me, and he said, "I can't go looking like this." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'm wearing shorts and flip-flops. I can't go dance in shorts and flip-flops." And I looked at my watch, and I said, "Well, the mall closes in 10 minutes. And we literally said, "See you at the club," to our friends, hopped in the car, and the mall was about half a mile away. I ran 2 red lights to get to the mall in time. John runs into the mall, literally like a scene from Pretty Woman, and walks into Diesel, which was his favorite clothing store at the time. And he says to the woman, "I need that and those shoes in my size. Meet me in the dressing room." And he was on a first name basis with these people. And literally within 15 minutes, he dropped $500 on clothes so he could look the part that he always likes to look when he goes out dancing. So it's tragically funny, I think, to a certain degree, because, oh my God, a lot of things could have happened that night, right? 1, I could have gotten pulled over. 2, I probably would have had a breathalyzer test, and that may have not gone in my favor. And then 3, why did we need to drop $500 on clothes so you could be seen for one night?
Our apartment was actually closer. We should have just gone home.
Oh, John, that's an exclamation point on that story. So, so I also read that, did one of you go to a Madonna concert and use?
That was going to be my story.
That was going to be his story.
So
Go ahead.
I feel like they're both John's stories.
Yeah, so I was going to grad school at the time when I was working for Charles Schwab, and every year I would get tuition reimbursement for, I forget exactly how much they pay me back for. And I got my tuition reimbursement right before Madonna was going to be in Las Vegas, and this was before we lived there. And so a whole bunch of my friends and I decided to go out to Las Vegas, and I spent my entire tuition reition. I did not put that towards my student loans.
$5,250 is the amount.
Paying that off. But I did spend my entire tuition reimbursement in Vegas gambling and seeing Madonna. And it was well worth it.
So that's not regrettable then.
None of this is regrettable. No.
This is, I think this is one of the points, right? A lot of people say, don't buy things, buy experiences. But the reality is that buying things and experiences can hurt you financially. There is no get out of jail free card financially just because you're buying experiences. That being said, we are still talking about this Madonna concert. And I will admit that after him coming back, I'm not a huge Madonna fan, but after him coming back, showing me some of the concert footage, I was like, man, I wish I would have gone to that show.
So then we went to the next one together.
Now, technically, did you use a student loan for that, or did you use tuition reimbursement money?
No, so I had to. I had my student loans that I was paying. Well, no, I didn't have to pay that back. I had my student loans, which got me through the year and a half of grad school. And then as each semester ended, I had to submit my tuition reimbursement so that I could prepay my student loans before I was actually required to pay them myself 6 months after I graduated. But I wasn't smart enough to do that.
Okay.
Or I was just a lot of fun, and I didn't do that.
It's really relatable. I mean, I genuinely have never been to a Madonna concert in any context, but the idea of sort of an impulse, whether it's a thing that you're buying or an experience that you're buying into, an impulse, and later on you go back and you love that experience that you had, but you also feel a little bit of that buyer's remorse, it's really relatable what you're sharing. So thank you. Appreciate it. I
we jointly are feeling the buyer's remorse because now I'm paying towards his student loans.
Yeah, we're almost done. But, and I don't, looking back, I don't regret it. It's been, we still talk about it, and it's still a lot of fun. I'm glad I don't make those kind of decisions now at my age. I've kind of, hopefully, for the most part, grown a little bit beyond that.
Well, I think there's definitely things that you can not regret because you did enjoy them and they were right for you at that time, but there's still a lesson learned
100%
from it, right?
Yeah. Those kinds of financial decisions today are made on $50 and $100 amounts rather than thousands of dollars.
Do you want the really good bottle of wine? Yes, we do.
Now, did you notice how Dr. Ross stated that? I mean, you can tell of the group of us who is the academic and the financial therapist who can take that and say, well, this is just a lesson learned, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well done, Dr. Ross.
I'm always looking for just to reframe these experiences as lessons, that we learn from.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right, because it's so easy for us to look back in judgment and anger, right? I'm going to pull an Oasis song here, but we can look back at these things, and especially if the experience wasn't as fulfilling as we had hoped, and more often than not, that's just the way they are. We are not great predictors of how happy we're going to be based on an experience or any sort of purchase. But we can look back on those things, and then all of a sudden we start to pile all sorts of shame and guilt and those kinds of things on top of ourselves. So we have to learn to say, it was a mistake. I recognize it was a mistake. What can I learn from it? How do I move forward? And how does it inform the decisions I make in the future and what I can share with other people around that mistake?
Yeah, that's
well said.
I mean,
that's very well said.
There's so much shame and blame in the realm of finance in general, and especially in the realm of debt. So I know Brian, wants to get into that next. But shame and blame in the realm of debt, it's not always the most useful emotional response, right? It certainly can inform our decisions going forward, but I think there can be more useful ways to process these decisions. Brian, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, Bruce. Sorry, Dr. Ross. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that is actually a really good transition into kind of our next follow-up question of, I know you've mentioned in the past that you have had credit card debt. So can you share, I guess, a little bit about with our listeners about what was going on at the height of your credit card debt, and then what kind of was the motivation to turn it around to start paying that off?
Absolutely. Do you want to go?
At the height of our credit card debt, John had just gone to a Madonna concert.
Okay, so right there in it.
it was all around that
time
period. I had left a 5-year relationship, and I think I was looking for my own lifestyle rather than the lifestyle I was having with my ex, and that meant a little bit more freeing lifestyle, doing things the way I wanted to have them done, or experiencing life the way that I wanted to. And that's when John and I got together. So I was already in debt. I already had credit card debt. I was just continuing to accumulate more. We always say I'm the nickel and dimer. John is the big spender. I mean, I was the kind of person who every single day I stopped and got a bagel and a cup of coffee on my way to work. Almost every day I went out to lunch with my friends, right? Not a big deal. Those things aren't bad.
Yeah,
but
they're just small little expenses.
Yeah, at the end of the month, I was adding typically an extra $200 to $400 to my credit card balances, because I had this story in the back of my head that I couldn't spend all of the money in my bank account. I had to have some money there. This is my scarcity mindset. I have to have some money there. So don't pay your credit cards off. Let's just keep having fun or enjoying life. And I was putting more and more and more and more on those credit cards. And that's how kind of I got to my point, my max when we had our combined $51,000 was a little over $17,000 in credit card debt.
I brought the rest of it to the table, but I had nice vacations. I had a nice car, a nice couch. I had a nice apartment. After I graduated college, I moved out to Denver, and I had about $5,000 of cash in my pocket to move out to Denver. I got that from graduation gifts. And so I had a surplus at that time. But then within about a year after that is when I had about $25,000 in credit card debt. Because when I got to my first apartment, I felt like I had to have all the grown-up things, the actual nice couch, actual paintings or pictures that you put on the wall and not posters anymore. I felt like I was beyond that. Needed new pots and pans and all that stuff. And then, of course, I was new to Colorado, so I needed new ski boots, bindings, new snowboard and all that. So I accumulated debt pretty quickly, and then I never really paid attention to my finances much beyond that, even though David and I both, our entire careers were in financial services. So about the time that we realized how much debt we had a combined tenure in financial services of about 15 years, helping other people with their money, but clearly not helping ourselves. And we didn't really have the money conversation until about a year and a half or so after we got together. We were living together at that point, and we had a joint account that we managed most of our common finances out of, but we still had our separate accounts at that time. And we just both assumed that the other one can't be nearly as bad with their money as I am. And it wasn't until we kind of had our come to Jesus moment that we realized, oh man, we're both, cobbler's kids with no shoes here. And life hasn't gone the direction that we wanted to. And that's kind of was our sort of our changing our trajectory.
What triggered that come to Jesus moment for you two, to have to sit down after the year and have that conversation then?
Yeah. So John and I went to the mountains in Colorado to visit his college roommate, and he was living up there with his girlfriend. And we went to this cute little town, Winter Park. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a world-class ski town. Really nice town. John and I have both been there before, but I think, propinquity of us being together and enjoying life and all of that, we said, you know what, this would be a great place to have a vacation home. and I love modern architecture. So I was like, well, let's look at buying land and building a modern home here as a vacation home. You know, that dream home, you tell all your friends you have, you invite them up for ski weekends, you let family use it, all that kind of stuff. This is before Airbnb was big and people could offset some of the expenses. But so on the way out of town on Sunday, we stopped at a realtor's office to check out what was available. And so we were looking at the price of homes, the price of land, all that kind of stuff. Hopped in the car, headed out of town, and we passed a sign that said elevation 9,320 feet or something close to that. And we crested over the top of the mountain, and we were having this kind of fantasy conversation about building this beautiful vacation home, right? And I don't know which one of us brought it up, but we asked the question, what do you think we can really afford? And I think it was being locked in a car, driving down the highway at 75 miles an hour that made us continue to flush that conversation out. We just kept on talking. And it went from buying land and building a vacation home to buying a condo that was already there to renting long-term during the ski season. We pull up in front of our place. We grab our bags, open up the door, and we walk down a flight of stairs into a basement apartment. We were renting an apartment from a friend of ours, and we were literally living in a hole, and our finances were literally in a hole. We were financial messes. And I could say all sorts of expletives there as to what we are, but we were at that time. But we clearly were hiding not just from each other, but from everyone else where we were at financially. And it was that realization. John and I literally, after coming back from this great weekend, we sat on the floor for like 2 hours, just kind of in a state of, I don't know, necessarily shock, but just kind of, we were depressed, we were angry, we were upset. We were like, what is going on with our lives that here we are, two financial professionals earning decent money. We weren't bringing in six figures, but we were making decent money. And we're living in a basement apartment. What's going on with our lives? And that was really the start of us figuring things out.
There's a great book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it's about, the structure. I'm sure that you've heard of it or read it, perhaps.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's that, seminal text that every film student in every college around the world, I'm sure, reads about, the structure of the classic stories and how many of the modern classics, Star Wars and whatever else, fit into that structure. And there's a moment in every one of these classic stories where the hero of the story, in this case, you two, they go into a cave. And that cave is usually metaphorical and not physical. But in your case, you went into this reflective cave, both physically and metaphorically, about your finances. At the end of these classic stories, and you see this in most movies, right? At least the ones with happy endings. The hero emerges from that cave having learned something, reflected on it, and then goes and conquers the challenge or the villain or what have you of the story. So that's kind of the focus of my next question. When you are managing money together now, how do you, conquer that challenge together? Like, how do you team up and manage your money together?
I say yes to John a lot.
Happy wife, happy life.
Just kidding. Yeah.
No, I think that's a great question. What has helped us manage our money together since that time, and not that we haven't made mistakes. We paid off our debt in about 2.5 years, and we racked up about $6,000 more debt shortly thereafter. So we didn't learn our lesson the first time, and we still make mistakes. But by and large, we're much more crystal clear on what it is that we want in life. One of the questions that we asked ourselves on that basement floor was, well, how did we get here? How do we have all of this theoretical knowledge? Like, our parents spent thousands of dollars for us to be smarter than this, and we still screwed everything up. So what's going on? And we realized, and this took us a couple of years to to get to the truth, but we realized that both of us came from times and places when it wasn't okay to be gay. So by the time we were out on our own, we felt like we had a lot of life to make up for, and we also had to prove to people who, either dismissed us or bullied us that we were actually better than they gave us credit for. And one of the best ways to do that in America is to have all this shiny, fancy stuff. But then on top of that, we found our circle of friends, and we felt that if we didn't live up to a certain archetype of what it means to be a gay man in America, then we would be excluded again from another community of people. So we felt we had to compete with Mr. and Mr. Jones. And so the question that we had to ask ourselves was, well, why are we still racking up debt? Why isn't our life as fulfilling as we wanted it to be? And why are we on this trajectory? And we realized that we weren't living up to what our own values were, because up until that point in time, we didn't know what our values were. So that started a whole conversation that took several years to get crystal clear on. But we realized that it came down to four things. We wanted to be able to give back to the LGBTQ community in such a way that we weren't also hurting ourselves. We wanted to be able to travel, but not do it on credit card debt. We want to save for a comfortable retirement. What was the fourth one? I just drew a blank.
You've just done two. So it's give back, safe, comfortable retirement,
travel. There's a fourth one.
And I think the kind of the foundation of all of this is John and I realized early on that we love each other and we love spending time with each other, and we wanted to spend more time with each other. And we knew that that getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, heading separate directions, going to work, and coming back at 6 o'clock in the evening, spending 2 hours together, preparing dinner and watching some TV, only to do it over and over and over again for the next 40 years. We're like, this is not the life that we wanted. And so we knew that we wanted, as a couple, we wanted to spend more time together. So that meant figuring out how we could support ourselves financially by being together. And that's when our idea of going down the path of becoming financial content creators really was born.
So to answer your question, knowing what our goals were, what our values were, that kind of helps us figure out, well, how do we use our spending? How do we save and invest our money? What is it we're trying to do? And every time we sort of start getting off that track of, well, we're not actually spending in alignment with our goals, and maybe that's why we can't go travel this year, or maybe why we can't, buy this certain investment or whatnot. That's kind of sort of, we use that as sort of our talisman.
Well, that's great. I am wondering, and not to, you've been discussing, getting in alignment with your values and your priorities. And I want to be careful not to, overgeneralize, but are there financial priorities or financial concerns that are more specific to the LGBTQ community?
There are. If John and I had the conversation about having a family early on in our relationship, and my partner from my previous relationship, he and I had a son together, and in the first 2 to 3 years, we spent over $100,000 in legal fees and various things to go through that process. And John and I just said, we're not going to have children because we want a stable financial life for ourselves first. And that we knew that bringing children into our relationship, a child or children into our relationship, when we weren't completely strong financially ourselves, could mean disaster for us as a family, or the kind of things that we would teach our children, especially because John and I looked back on our own lives and reflected on how little we learned about money growing up. The other thing is that we were not married. And I do not come from, I've been disowned by my family because of their religious stand. And John's family is somewhat similar, although we have a relationship with them. We knew that they would never be supportive of us getting married. So we knew we had a choice of, do we pay for our own wedding or just not have a wedding? And so if you're a typical 35-year-old same-sex couple deciding to have your own wedding and you drop $25,000 on that, you're literally taking about $375,000 to $450,000 out of your future retirement pocket. And so that's one of the things that we just knew that was a choice we had to make. So we did end up getting married, but part of it was we knew that we needed to get strong financially before we could do that. So I actually could go on. There are a number of different things that affect LGBT people when it comes to money. There's micro things that happen early on in life, especially if you're not in in an accepting, affirming family, right? So you may be living a double life as a child, and that may mean that you are spending some of your own money to live that double life outside of the home. Going off to school, where literally there was just a recent article on NBC News about this. LGBT kids are choosing to move out of state in a lot of states right now because of what is happening to they're seeing at their state level, right? So they're leaving these states. And what happens when we go to a college out of state? You pay out of state tuition, which is
often double.
Right.
More.
It's way more expensive. This is typically why most LGBT students graduate with about 16% more student loan debt. This is one of those contributors. Also, if you don't have an accepting family, just think of the kinds of things that most young people get from their parents. We know millennials who still have their parents paying for their phone bill, right? These kids are in their 30s and 40s and their parents are still paying for their phone bills. That's not happening to kids who leave home because they need to go to a safer place. They aren't getting the kind of financial benefits, help buying or help on a down payment on your house, or help buying the first things for your first apartment, right? Furnishing your first apartment. All of those little things add up over time. And the great reflection of that today is the fact that well more than 50% of LGBT seniors have nothing saved for retirement. And that's way more than the general population. And that's those kind of little things that have added up throughout life. And John and I have experienced some of them. Fortunately, we live in a world today where we ourselves personally can make some financial advancements, and society is a little bit more accepting in many places, which helps.
It's really sobering to reflect on the fact that discrimination, a lot like it compounds.
Yes.
Right? So the micro and macro discrimination that you face, and that LGBTQ people and couples face, compounds over time. Certainly sobering, and it means that together as a community, we have a lot of work to do until everybody gets a fair shake. So thank you for sharing your story. I wanted to ask an extension of this question to do with estate planning. How does estate planning differ? And again, to use Bruce's a very adequate disclaimer, not to overgeneralize, but how does estate planning change for LGBTQ partners, couples?
Yeah, so we benefited, the community benefited greatly from marriage equality in 2015. Up until that point, we sort of had to do a patchwork of legal maneuvering to sort of, as best as we could, pretend that we were married and try to protect everybody's assets, but there were still lots of loopholes. But so 2015 was a good year for us, and so with that regard, for the most part, estate planning and setting up your will is not a whole lot different for LGBTQ couples as it is for opposite sex couples. But with some of the threats coming from the Supreme Court, the idea of maybe overturning marriage equality and whatever that might mean, that has kind of gotten the community into a little bit of a scarcity, a fear mindset, and thinking about, okay, what is it we need to do? Do we need to go back and do that patchwork together? So we have marriage for right now, and if that gets dissolved for whatever reason in some way, shape, or form, then we've got this as a backup. The problem with that, though, is that that's not free, right? Your attorney is going to want money for that, or you can try to do it on your own, but then you risk you have the risk of having it not done correctly. And many of us still have family members who would much rather that we weren't married to a same-sex person. So if they have the opportunity to force our state to go to probate, they would much rather have that, right? So I don't know that there's a whole lot different right now, other than that fear factor, and that there are a lot of people who are trying to do the legal maneuvering to try to protect their assets in case they were to pass away before their partner.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's what John and I are doing on Friday. Is we're spending an hour with our attorney, and one of the things we're talking about is how do we prepare ourselves if something happens. And so we're going to go through that process of how do we create our will and our trust and our survivor benefit really package for the one or the other. That is, there are over 1,000 laws written into the tax code that benefit married couples. And those kinds, you talked about compounding, those have compounded for decades for traditional families, and has in some ways built generational wealth. And we're kind of feeling, all of us are feeling a little bit like, okay, are we going to start going backwards here? Like we have in so many other instances recently at the state level. And what, we're almost getting to the point in our country where what may be viable and protective of somebody in, say, California or Colorado is going to be very different than what may be happening in somewhere like Tennessee. I'm just going to pick on Tennessee right now because that's right. I'd like to give a swift kick to that state and their state legislators. But I think that's one of the things we're worried about right now.
That you bring up all of these compounding problems that compound in themselves over time. I mean, one of the things that I think about today as we're recording this, it's April 18th. It's the final day that you can file tax returns. That prior to 2015, you couldn't file jointly. And anybody who does taxes who are married realizes that in most circumstances, you save a heck of a lot of money from filing jointly. And then the people that were discriminated, I mean, that was systemic discrimination by definition over decades. That does compound. And, the idea of now that, folks are fighting for their own rights. I have close friends of mine who live in Tennessee and some of Arkansas and some of these other states that, for whatever reason, feel like that the number one threat in America is like a trans 12-year-old, and that they are in a position now where they have to move. Their 15-year-old is getting gender affirming care, and their 15-year-old is like one of the children of 42% of trans kids who attempt suicide as teenagers, right? 42% attempt suicide. And they know that if they are not be able to get to the care that they need, that is a very real threat. So they literally have to move, and that's happening across the country in these states. And, these people are real, fighting through, these life-threatening attacks. So I appreciate that you brought that up and you made it real to our listeners, because there's human beings on the other end of that and children on the other end of that who are suffering. So we like to conclude the podcast with just some real applicable advice that people can walk away with, understanding what they can do in their lives right now to make a change, to improve it. And so if you could provide one piece of advice for LGBTQ couples that would improve their lives, whatever it may be, can you share?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. You go first.
I think that because of our historical nature of our relationships, a lot of LGBT couples have, in many ways, kept their financial lives separate, and have not operated as a team. For most traditional couples, it's we meet, we get married, we have kids, we buy a house, we have kids. There's this is the way you're supposed to do it, right? But that wasn't around for many of us. So what I would encourage most all LGBT couples to do is to figure out a way to work as a team with your finances. I'm not saying that you need to have all your accounts shared, but what you need to do is you need to figure out how to work together as a team. And there are ways to be protective of what you have, maybe what you brought into the relationship through prenups or postnups, that you can allow yourselves to work together as a team. There was a study that was done by the app no longer exists. It was acquired by another company, but Honeyfi was an app that was designed at helping couples manage their money together. And they did a study, and they found that I think it was 83%. 83% of couples said that they had better sex when they talked about money with each other, right? So that just goes to show the trust level that is built when you start to work together on your finances. And that is something that I think a lot of same-sex couples desire and need, is that we have a strong relationship as couples, or if there are more people in the relationship.
We appreciate you sharing that, and in particular the context that you provided earlier in the show of the complexities of what it's like to be somebody from the LGBTQ community that grew up at a time where it was even more. Society did not. I hate saying the word accept, but society made it very difficult for people from the LGBTQ community, and how that created another layer of complexities that you have to work through. These needs, these psychological urges to have more stuff, to present yourself in a certain way. Because I think that working through the communicating as a couple, understanding those things is a heck of a lot more important than numbers on a spreadsheet, right? That's the stuff that is easy to manage. You just got to understand each other first. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It's been an honor, and we certainly will keep in touch and would love to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate you giving us a platform and for sharing the story of LGBTQ plus couples and people.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcasts, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with your friends. A special thanks to our guest, and of course to all of our listeners. Please be on the lookout for new and exciting announcements on modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.